Hong Kong journalist accused of incitement in China.
A big rise in drug use by teenage girls in Hong Kong.
Kasai head for poll wins recount order over fraud.
And McCurry wins the Mc prefix from McDonald's.
The DHK Evening News with Ivan Leung and Amy Blom.
Good evening. The authorities in Xinjiang has claimed that 3 Hong Kong journalists were inciting public disorder while they were covering the unrest in Urumqi last week. They will also say 2 of them has not been authorized to report in the city.
The journalist employers, TVB and Now TV, have rejected the allegations. The director of the Xinjiang Autonomous Regional Information Office, Hao Hanmin, said authorities had spotted the 3 inciting crowds of protesters last Friday by making hand gestures.
Some other local news now. The number of young female drug abusers in Hong Kong has jumped by 15% for the first half of the year. According to new government figures, there's also been a 25% surge in the number of drug users aged between 12 and 15. Authorities suspect the surge in the drugs used among girls may stem from a misconception that it can help them to lose weight. While the latest figure shows them only slight 3.3 rise of overall numbers in the drug abuse under 21 years old, the figures for the drugs used among girls surged by 15.4% to 751 record cases in the first 6 months of the year. A High Court judge says he wants to see a case brought by 18 former Cathay Pacific pilots against the airline to proceed briskly when it begins early next month. The pilots are suing the carrier for unfair dismissal. During the pre-trial hearing, Mr. Justice Ryan warned that if he felt that the lines of questioning of any issues was not heading anywhere, he might intervene to stop it. He also says only documents relevant to the case should be submitted. 18 pilots were among the group known as the 49ers who were sacked by Cathay Pacific in an industrial dispute in 2001.
Some international news now. The First Solar Incorporated said on Tuesday it plans to build the world's largest solar plant in China in the first major foray by a US company into the Asian nation's fast-growing alternative energy sector. Under a memorandum of understanding with the Chinese government, First Solar will build a 2-gigawatt power plant, enough to power about 3 million Chinese households at Ordos City in Inner Mongolia, and consider building a new manufacturing plant in China. First Solar will begin constructing a 30-megawatt demonstration project in June 2010 in Ordos. The second and third phases call for 100-megawatt and 870-megawatt projects that will be completed in 2014. A final 1,000-megawatt installation will be finished in 2019. Deflation has arrived on Britain's high streets for the first time since February 2007. Figures from the British Retail Consortium show shop prices across the sector dropped 0.1% last month compared with a year ago. The drop in price tags is being driven by huge falls in food price inflation, according to the BRC. Today's figures showed food inflation eased for the 5th month in a row to 2.3% as the recession continues to bear down on prices and demand. The BRC added that non-food goods remain cheaper than they were a year ago, down 1.4%, continuing a trend now seen for 9 months straight.
Other international news, a British journalist kidnapped in Afghanistan has been freed by NATO troops, according to the report. Stephen Farrell, reporter with New York Times, was abducted on Saturday along with his Afghan interpreter Sultan Mohammed while reporting on the aftermath of NATO airstrike in the northern province of Kunduz. Mr. Farrell was rescued by a raid of NATO forces, but his colleague was killed by Taliban fighters during the operation. Some reports suggest that British special forces were involved in the rescue operation.
A panel of experts appointed by the White House has warned that current plans to send astronauts back to the moon in preparation for manned missions to Mars are just not viable. The experts say the current budget of the space agency, NASA, would need to be increased by billions of dollars. Without the extra money, the experts say NASA would have to work with private companies now trying to embark on commercial space flights. The Federal Police in Australia say they've launched a war crimes investigation into the deaths in East Timor in 1975 of a group of journalists who've become known as the Balibo Five. In 2007, an Australian coroner found that the 5 journalists were executed by Indonesian special forces in the town of Balibo in East Timor to stop them from revealing details of the impending Indonesian invasion of the territory.
Now, Hollywood's studio behind films based on the Hobbit trustees of a J.R.R. Tolkien estate has said they have settled a lawsuit that clears the way for what is expected for a blockbuster movie based on the book.
The 1937 book by Tolkien is about a diminutive character named Bilbo Baggins who goes on a treasure-seeking adventure and sets the stage for Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings trilogy with its epic tale of magic and warfare. Financial terms of the settlement were not released. India's second-largest private airline, Jetways, has cancelled nearly 120 flights following a protest by hundreds of pilots who reported sick. At least 35 flights from the financial capital Mumbai and 18 flights from Delhi have been cancelled. Hundreds of passengers have been stranded at various airports, leading to angry confrontations. The pilots are protesting against the dismissal of 2 senior pilots last month by the airline. The pilots' union, the National Aviators Guild, has been demanding the reinstatement of the pilots.
And finally tonight, fast food giant McDonald's has lost an 8-year legal battle to stop Indian restaurant in Kuala Lumpur calling itself McFerry.
The Malaysian Federal Court ruled unanimously that McDonald's could not appeal against an earlier court verdict, which decided it had no right to a monopoly on the use of the Mc prefix. That's all for now. I will be back at 7:30 for World News Tonight.
Yep, Malik Dave will be here for the late news at 10:30. Netherlands, good night.
Good night for now.